This time we're in another GAA home in Lissummon, County Armagh, and the GAA is also an organisation which is well known for its intermarrying. We're in the house of Sean and Attracta Murtagh here, and it was the amalgamation of two GAA families. Attracta lived at the other side of the parish, and her own family was very much involved in GAA. And then Sean, the Murtagh family here, he had his GAA story to tell. So we're going to hear from the two of them here. And we'll start with ladies. Attracta, this whole ethos of GAA in your life, how did it all begin? How far can you remember back?
Well, I can remember going at a very, very young age. Saying I was very young, it would have been very young, because at all the carecropping matches, we used to have to crawl through the people's legs to get into the front to see the match. There were that many at the football and that there. I would have went with my father now to quite a few matches. First of all, you would have went to the local matches, then the tournaments, you would have went in the carecropping bus and so forth and that there. But there would have been that many at the, as I was saying, you'd have to, there was that many you'd had to crawl through the legs, as I said. There was a man involved in the club up round carecropping, and if you had been standing beside him, you'd have kicked the legs. Colin Crowley, you called him, because he was standing on the sideline, and if you were ever anywhere near him, you would have kicked. As the ball would go up the field, he would kick with the right foot or the left foot, and you'd be lucky. So that's my earliest memories. From a very, very young age, I was always involved going to the football. On the carecropping bus first, and then when you got a car, I went with my brother who played for carecropping. You would have went in the car with him then.
Sean, can you remember the seeds being planted in your early life?
Well, my very earliest memories would be with going to the maybe an Ulster final in Clonus with my father, but we didn't have a car at the time, and I used to go with local men there that would have went till.
When would this have been? Would this have been 50s, 60s?
It would have been before the 60s. And it would have been till Clonus, till an Ulster final or a semi-final, but we would have went with them in the car till. It was a day out for us. We just really weren't that much into county football at the time, but it was just a delight to get away for the day, and from early morning to late as evening. So other than that, that would be the seed of the, in general, of the start off of GAA in our family.
Who all was involved in the family? You remember your father?
Well, my father would have been in. He would have been the county supporter, like, but we didn't. We were too young to go to most matches. He just went with neighbours that had transport.
How would they went in those days?
Oh, they would have went to the far away matches. One neighbour had a car. I think maybe it was one of the very few cars there was in the country at the time.
Did they ever go on the bikes?
Well, there is stories of going to the like of David Park in Lurgan and different things like that there. On bicycles till county matches like that there. But if it was far away to Clonus or somewhere, they always just Harry McManus or Seamus and them men had cars at that time, and they took them along to the long distance matches.
Is there any other members in your family tree involved in the GAA?
Well, not till
brothers and.
Oh, yes, Paddy, he played for carecropping. Oliver, he played for carecropping. Brian played for carecropping, but I was just in between ages, and I never played any because there was no club in our area at the time. Carecropping was the parish team, and the three brothers played, but I didn't play at that age group.
When you were starting to play, what age do you remember? From what you were explaining there was no local club in the area when you were in your teenagers, would that be right?
That is correct, yeah.
So, who would have learnt you the skills to play?
Well, my memories of before, when I would be about the 16, 17, 18 year run, we had a fair-sized garden up the back of the house, and it was we had wee small goalposts up on that pitch, and we would have played of a Sunday, and friends and young fellas and girls and all would have come along to our house and played in the back garden. But to be coached or on scales or anything at that age, no, we weren't involved. No.
When did this begin? The local club was formed in 1972.
72,
so
yeah.
Was there a manager or a coach?
Well, there were just local men at that particular time. Was run the pick the teams and took a bit of training and all the rest of it.
Tractor, would your family have been involved with the county? Would you have been supporting the county?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was, what do you call it? I would have been in Croke Park now in the 60s when the great Kerry teams and the Dublin teams and all. I remember going now to different things. Like there was no stand. You just went in, and I remember going to Croke Park one day with my brother and his girlfriend. He wasn't married at that time. And I can remember going with him. It would have been in the early 60s. I didn't even see the match because there was that many people standing in front. But I remember being there. I think Armagh were there in 1968 in the minors. And there was 3 Carrickruppen lads playing on the team. And I remember being there then. I wouldn't have been there now every year, but I had been.
Did you have any heroes then? Was there a certain player?
Mick O'Connell would have been he would have been the great.
What about Armagh heroes? Did any of them qualify for the
Well, I can remember
hero?
being at Armagh matches and that there when Danny Kelly would have been the great, you know, when I would have been at it, Anthony Bennett, you know, they would have all have been playing. But Armagh they weren't very successful at that time. I don't believe I ever was at an Armagh match that they won. It seemed to be always, you know, defeated and that there. But I can't ever remember being at, you know, saying I would have been too young and, you know, 53. I was never there, you know, in the late 50s. I would say it was the 60s before I would have been at any of the big county matches.
Sean, the local team got up and running around the early 70s and all. This is where you started your serious football career. Yeah. How did it go at the start?
Well, I never played underage football at any stage. I was in my about 20, 21 before I even started playing football at all, because there again there was no club in the local area. But when we started off, the start of the club was a priest, Father Pat Cassidy, who arrived in the parish to Lower Killeavy, and he was come to our area. And when he came to the area, to his surprise, he found that young people, there was no youth clubs, no football, nothing for them to do. So he started up a few ideas, and we had nowhere even to meet, and they got a few things organised, and we met in the chapel.
That was the meeting.
That was one of the first meetings of my first committee, or setting up bits and pieces of for the young people in that at that time. That was the way. That would be long before the actual the club, the football team at the present was set up. A few years before that.
Just while you're on the subject of GAA and the clergy, it would have been quite cordial that time, wouldn't it? There would have been a good relationship between both.
No, absolutely, yeah. But with that particular Father Pat Cassidy that came into the area, it was very, very close between the community and him, and he was a very great man. So he was.
How do you feel things are going along that way now?
Well, there's a big shift there. So it's a lot different now. We were just passing the mark there a few Sundays ago, and even last Sunday, how many of the present actual football team was in the chapel. Before that, I'm not saying they don't go anywhere, but like the way they live in different areas now, It's just they don't live in the actual area of Lissummon. Doesn't say they don't go to mass, but there'll be a big difference in it, like from that time, sort of everywhere.
Have you any notions on that Attracta, the relationship between church and GAA? Would you like to see it continue?
Oh, certainly you would. Certainly you'd like to see it continue, and that there is seems to be a big void there in comparison to years ago. Like always on committees, the president of a club was always the parish priest or whatever priest was in the community, wasn't it? You know, in years gone by, like that seems to have slipped. But with regard to young ones now, they've changed. You know, with regard to going to the chapel and that there, and that's the way it is. But I think it is nice for that the church and the club would still be very. But I think in a lot of areas they still like we have a good relationship with any priest that was ever here and that there. But with regard to club members and that there seems to be a.
So you got married in around that era, and along came the babies, and what sort of an effect did that have on your life, your involvement with the GAA, bringing up your family, and then I suppose they grew on to be involved in schoolboy football and that type of thing?
Yeah.
How did it reflect on family life? What was your Sundays like, for instance?
Well, one of the memories of the talking about when the children were born, we went to the football match in Cavan, and I think one of our children wasn't a week old.
Our Gavin was a week old, and Philomena O'Hagan met me in in Clonus. No, in Breffni Park. She met me in Breffni Park, and she was astonished that I was at the match. So I can always remember that. But football was our life. Like we went, and still is to the day, and that there, probably will be as long as we're.
So your family was riding the back of the
They were riding the back of the car, as I said, and I don't think it really done them any harm with regard to.
How do you think it affected them when they were brought up on this diet of GAA? Did they turn their back on it forever? Or
No.
themselves?
What do you call it? The three of them are still playing GAA. Gavin's still playing for Lissummon. Orla's still playing for Lissummon. And Dervla is just, as you know, in Australia at the moment, and she's playing football out there. GAA out there, so they're still very heavily involved.
After the playing days, was that the end of your involvement?
Oh, definitely not.
Only beginning?
Definitely not. It was beginning. It was just playing days seemed to only take up about 1 or 2 days a week. But after I quit playing, it was more. It moved into 3 or 4 days a week, maybe.
What was your roles then?
Well, first of all, I think it basically was underage. Because Gavin, the son, was at the early age, and he had started to play football. He started to play at 10 and 12 year old, and the position was in the club when you were going to the matches. There wasn't that many volunteers. That when you were going to the matches, you always got the job of being the manager. So that went on from 10s, 12s, and outside our house every Tuesday evening there used to be the drop off point. We just picked up really all the local fellas and headed off to the match on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or Thursday evening with 5, 6, 7 lads in the car, and that went on for till about, to that group of players were about 14, 15, 16 years of age, and we managed on minors right up to minors. So that was the space about 4 years, 5 years after I quit playing.
That was in the days before health and safety was invented.
There was no health and safety, just as many as you could get into the car, you got them in, and that was it.
What other roles had you on the committees?
Well, I was on the committee for God knows, a number of years. I held a register